Okay. So here we are. We're Easter Sunday morning, and we're excited, and the excitement, yay! That's the tired me. That's the tired me. Last week, I think it was after the David and Goliath story, right? Or did we hear about that last week? I can't remember. They all went together. Saul tries to kill David. Yeah. Well, and that story continues. The song went out. Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his 10,000s. Saul didn't care much for that. And of course we get this covenant between Jonathan and David. They become really close. Today we get a little bit of an idea of how close that is, that Jonathan is actually willing to betray his own family in order to protect Saul. And so very powerful moments today. It's leading up. It's a shame that we're not meeting next week, because I know I'm going to give you all a little homework, but I may give you all more. We'll see. Like reading ahead or something, because we won't get to it today, but what follows is one of those horrific acts in the Bible. What Saul does, you finally get to see what he's capable of. You've thought about it before, but you've never really seen it yet. Our final slide will give you a trailer for that, if you will, coming preview. So let's go ahead. Let's start this thing. Share and then presentation mode.
It's so funny.
What's that?
Funny time.
Game of Thrones.
I love it.
Well, y'all, maybe I need to tell y'all why that's, I told y'all that at the very beginning. I call it Game of Thrones. Oh, okay. And it's not me. I'm not called. I don't think I'm called. No. It's called Game of Thrones because when I originally was putting all this together, I was trying to see this from 4 different perspectives. Number one, the prophetic perspective. The second was the priestly perspective. The third was the royal perspective. And the fourth, which ties it all together, is the eternal perspective. And instead of calling them perspectives, I called them thrones. And of course, when I originally started putting this together, that was a big hit on TV, which, when I put it on YouTube and people type in Game of Thrones, my stuff pops up. So I didn't add the Game of Thrones, because that's technically the name of the TV show. So taking the off, they come and they learn about Jesus or God or the Bible when they thought they were going to see some medieval dragon or something. Wait long enough and we'll get there. So, not medieval dragons, but dragons, sure. Okay, so we're in 1 Samuel. This is part 10. Man, it's hard to believe it's been 10 weeks doing this. It seems like more. Chapter 20, we'll start in verse 1 here. David fled from Naioth in Ramah. He came before Jonathan, there we go, and said, "What have I done? What is my guilt? And what is my sin against your father that he is trying to take my life?" He said to him, "Far from it." This is Jonathan, "Far from it, you shall not die. My father does nothing either great or small without disclosing it to me. And why should my father hide this from me? Never." Boy, Jonathan needs to learn some things about his dad. But David also swore, "Your father knows well that you like me, and he thinks, do not let Jonathan know this, or he will be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, there is but a step between me and death." And Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you say, I will do for you." David said to Jonathan, "Tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at the meal, but let me go so that I might hide in the field until the third evening." There's that third again, the third meal.
Yeah, so David is supposed to have dinner with.
New Moon Festival. He's one of the commanders of the military. He's expected to be there, and he's also a son-in-law, so he's expected to be at this meal. So Jonathan here is oblivious to what his father's plans are, and I think it surprises him a little bit. But he's going to do anything to prove he's loyal to David. So, yeah, the new moon feast is mentioned in Numbers 28, if y'all want to go back and read that.
Is that a Hebrew, Jewish religious festival? I mean, it's not a pagan thing?
No, it's Jewish. They, in fact, their calendars were based on the lunar cycle. So, so new moon was one of those that were, like I said, it's in Numbers, dictating to them when it would take place, what would take place. So, apparently it was at least a day, maybe 2-day event, but sometimes when it happened, it took place over a Sabbath, which kind of threw things off. So that's what happens in this story here. So, if your father misses me at all, I can't read that. Tell me. Okay. David earnestly asked leave of me to run to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the family. If he says, good, it will be well with your servant. But if he is angry, then know that evil has been determined by him. Therefore, deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a sacred covenant with you. But if there is guilt in me, kill me yourself. Why should you bring me to your father? Jonathan said, far be it from you. If I knew that it was decided by my father that evil should come upon you, would I not tell you? Then David said to Jonathan, who will tell me if your father answers you harshly? Jonathan replied, come, let's go out into the field. So they both went out into the field. Now, it's interesting that would transpire that way. Jonathan is coming up with a plan, and he needs to hash it out away from any possible hearers. And so him and David go out into the field to do this. So, but it mentions this sacred covenant here between Jonathan. Now, when you hear, covenant's one thing, but sacred covenant means God's involved with this covenant now. So, and so, yeah, the sacred covenant happens between Jonathan, David, and God. And Jonathan has a plan. So, what is the plan? Jonathan said to David, by the Lord, the God of Israel, when I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow, or on the third day, if he is well disposed toward David, shall I not then send and disclose it to you? But if my father intends to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan and more also, if I do not disclose it to you, and send you away so that you may go in safety. May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. If I am still alive, show me the faithful love of the Lord. But if I die, never cut off your faithful love from my house, even if the Lord were to cut off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. Thus Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord seek out the enemies of David. Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him as he loved his own life. Man, that phrase, never cut off your faithful love from my house, that will come into play when David becomes king. So, spoiler alert, keep that in your mind. That phrase will come into play when David becomes king and Saul is dead. So, verse 18, Jonathan said to him, tomorrow is the new moon. You will be missed because your place will be empty. On the day after tomorrow, you shall go a long way down. Go to the place where you hid yourself earlier and remain beside the stone there. I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it as though I shot at a mark. Then I will send the boy saying, go find the arrows. If I say to the boy, look, the arrows are on this side of you, collect them. Then you are to come, for as the Lord lives, it is safe for you and there is no danger. But if I say to the young man, look, the arrows are beyond you, then go, for the Lord has sent you away. As for the matter about which you and I have spoken, the Lord is a witness between you and me forever. So Jonathan, his plan is to go out for target practice. Apparently that was a typical thing for him. Hopefully he's better than his father. Saul, he can't throw when he gets mad. So new moon feasts were typically one day, but if the one day happened to be on a Sabbath, then the feast would be pushed back by another day. So, and they always started at night because that's how the days work. So you end up with 3 days because any part of a day counts as one day. That's why the example here at Easter, Jesus was raised on the 3rd day. Well, he was crucified on Friday. If you do the math, Saturday, Sunday, that's only 2. But any part of Friday counts as day 1, as the first day. So, and any part of Sunday would count as a day. So the 3rd day. So that's how that works. That didn't change much. So that's what's going on here. So new moon feasts were typically one day, which took place over a 2-day period because it started at night. But when Sabbath happened during that, it might push it back to a 3rd day. Wow. Okay. So David hid himself in the field. When the new moon came, the king sat at the feast to eat. The king sat upon his seat, as at other times, upon the seat by the wall. Jonathan stood while Abner sat beside Saul's side, but David's place was empty. So apparently Saul, we know he was a military leader. We know that he's full of himself. Whenever this probably happens in diplomatic circles as well, but in a military circle, the person who is highest in charge never sits with his back to the door. They always sit where they can see everything and nobody can get behind them. That's how that works.
That's called a gunfighter seat.
Yeah. So that's what's happening with Saul here. He has positioned his chair so that nobody can enter without him knowing, and nobody can get behind him. Abner took a seat of honor next to Saul, as this says. Now, Abner at this point is one of the commanders of the army as well. David would be on the other side as another commander of the military. Although having, being son-in-law too, that would play into that as well. Jonathan, it says he was standing. Now, Jonathan being the son, and he's also a commander of the military, at least part of it. He should probably be sitting too, but he's standing. Maybe he's on duty that evening. Don't know. We just know he's standing. So I reckon that it may be to gauge everyone's responses at David being absent. This is part of his plan is, I need to find out, I need to gauge the room and see how everybody else is feeling that David ain't here. Because if it ain't his own father that's trying to kill him, maybe it's one of the other people might be. It could have been a matter of protocol that he couldn't sit until everyone else was seated. Since David wasn't there, he couldn't sit yet. So a lot of number of things that could be there. We just don't know. Or I don't know. I'll say I don't know. So verse 26, Saul did not say anything that day, for he thought, something has befallen him. He is not clean. Surely he is not clean. But on the 2nd day, the day after the new moon, David's place was empty. And Saul said to his son Jonathan, why has the son of Jesse not come to the feast either yesterday or today? Jonathan answered Saul, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. He said, let me go, for our family is holding a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to be there. So now, if I have found favor in your sight, let me get away and see my brothers. For this reason, he has not come to the king's table. Saul here cannot even say David's name. You notice he says, where is the son of Jesse? So day one happens, starting that evening, that's where Abner's sitting, Saul's sitting, Jonathan's standing, and David's seat's empty. Saul believes David didn't come to that one because he might have been unclean. Okay, we can get through with that. However, the ritual would only take a day.
This says something about the lying discussion we had yesterday.
Maybe. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are righteous reasons for doing the wrong, for doing the wrong. So yes. So Saul thinks that, maybe David's just unclean, and he's got to go through this day of ritual to purify himself. But day 2 arrives and David still ain't there. Now at this point, there's not an excuse, because David should have been able to purify himself. He could have finished it in one day. So Jonathan here gives David an alibi that they had previously discussed, that David has gone to Bethlehem to participate in a family new moon ritual. So, albeit a false one. Maybe false. We don't know. We don't know whether maybe Jesse's family did. I don't know. But we know David's not there because he's hiding in the field. So. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. Oh, he didn't like, that phrase, don't shoot the messenger. He said to him, Saul said to Jonathan, you son of a perverse, rebellious woman.
Not my son, but
You son of a.
Yeah, yeah.
You son of a gun.
Do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives upon the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Now send and bring him to me, for he should surely die. And Jonathan answered his father Saul, why should he be put to death? What has he done? But Saul threw his spear at him to strike him. We're seeing a pattern with Saul, aren't we?
Glad he's not an actor.
He's not very good with the street.
Well, he lets anger control him, and when he gets angry, he cannot see straight. So Jonathan knew that it was the decision of his father to put David to death. Jonathan rose from the table in fierce anger and ate no food on the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David and because his father had disgraced him. So Saul sees through Jonathan's ruse, or seemingly does, hurls an insult at Jonathan's mother. And Jonathan sees Saul's true self in this moment. And of course, we mentioned Saul cannot aim when he's mad.
Do
So
we know who Jonathan's mother was?
yeah, it mentions it before. It mentions it earlier, but
She's not important.
well, yeah, as most women aren't in scripture. So they lose, most of them aren't even named. So, but yeah, we do know who she is. I just can't think of
Oh, it's okay.
yeah, and it's funny. One thing I may not have mentioned when we go back, remember Saul is from the tribe of Benjamin, and about 200 years prior to this, during the time of the judges, the Benjaminites did something evil. They attacked a group and completely slaughtered them when the rest of the tribes told them, no, you shouldn't have done that. And so they waged war against Benjamin. Also, the other 11 tribes, they waged war against Benjamin, completely wipe out all but about 300 of the men, or 300 of them. We'll say 300 in Benjamin. So Benjamin almost became extinct. After they've realized what they've done, in their own anger, they've almost wiped out their tribes people, their own tribes people. They realize, oh, we can't let this happen. The tribe of Benjamin must live on. And so their answer, we're going to attack those people. We're going to kill all their men, and we're going to bring all their women over here. That way Benjamin can still contain a line. They'll bring all those women over here and give them as wives to the men in the tribe of Benjamin in order to perpetuate the tribe.
Hot dog.
Yeah, huh?
Hot dog.
Yeah. So the tribe of Benjamin already now has a tainted bloodline.
Yeah, because doesn't heritage in Judaism go through the mother?
Yes.
So these
The-
Jewish men are fathering children that aren't going to be true Jews because their mothers are.
Correct. And that continues on throughout their whole line. And so here is Saul of the tribe of Benjamin. He's not pure blood Jew. He's not. So he is perverse in the whole thing of it. And here he is calling Jonathan's mother perverse. It takes one to know one, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, I thought I'd bring that up there. Verse 35. In the morning, Jonathan went out into the field to the appointment with David, and with him was a little boy. He said to the boy, run and find the arrows that I shoot. As the boy ran, Jonathan, shot an arrow beyond him. When the boy came to the place where Jonathan's arrow had fallen, Jonathan called after the boy and said, is the arrow not beyond you? Jonathan called after the boy, hurry, be quick, do not linger. So Jonathan's boy gathered up the arrows and came to his master. But the boy knew nothing. Only Jonathan and David knew the arrangement. Jonathan gave his weapons to the boy and said to him, go and carry them to the city. As soon as the boy had gone, David rose from beside the stone heap and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. He bowed 3 times and they kissed each other and wept with each other. David wept the more. So here's David bowing 3 times, a reverence to the covenant, not only to Jonathan, but to God as well. And David wept the more. They both know that their relationship has changed forever at this point, and that David is capital enemy number one. So, verse 42. Then Jonathan said to David,
Go in peace.
"Go in peace, since both of us have sworn in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, and between my descendants and your descendants forever." He got up and left, and Jonathan went into the city. Now, this is just a renewal of that three-sided covenant, David, Jonathan, and God. On to chapter 21. So David's running from Gibeah, which is where Saul would have been, where Saul's palace was. David came to Nob, to the priest Ahimelech. Ahimelech came trembling to meet David and said to him, "Why are you alone and no one with you?" David said to the priest Ahimelech, "The king has charged me with a matter and said to me, no one must know anything of the matter about which I send you and with which I have charged you. I have made an appointment with the young men for such and such place. Now then, what have you at hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever is here." The priest answered David, "I have no ordinary bread at hand, only holy bread, provided that the young men have kept themselves from women." David answered the priest, "Indeed, women have been kept from us as always when I go on an expedition. The vessels of the young men are holy even when it is a common journey. How much more today will their vessels be holy?" So I think I put notes on this page. I did. So the priest gave him the holy bread, for there was no bread there except the bread of the presence, which is removed from before the Lord to be replaced by hot bread on the day it is taken away. So Ahimelech literally translates to brother of the king. That was not the case here. That's what it translates to. He's scared. David's appearance is unusual. Nob means high place, so that was a name that was given to several different places. But a high place, and in this case, apparently there's an altar there. An altar. This may be where the ark was. It doesn't say that, but at this point, we still think the ark was in Kiriath Jearim at this point. But this was, they talk about the bread here. That was showbread, which was always 12 fresh loaves. It may be translated shoe bread or bread of the presence in your translations. There were 12 loaves, and they replaced it every time it got cold. So throughout the day, they would be great baking bread. Man, that must have been a wonderful smell. He gave David what was remaining of those loaves that were there before they were replaced. The bread technically could only be eaten by priests in the presence of the Lord. That's found in Leviticus 24:9. The priest even makes sure David is clean. Human meat, yes.
Is this the story that Jesus refers to? It's later.
Mhm. Yeah, David, when he's traveling with his mind, with a group of people, what she's getting at, Jesus mentions a story about David eating the grains from the field, gleaning from the field. There was a law of hospitality that was in place in ancient Near East, that when people cleared their fields, they would leave some of the stuff on the outside of the fields for passersby, for those who needed food. And so that's what Jesus is referring to. The fact that they did it on the Sabbath was what the issue was with David.
Okay, so it was gleaning, it wasn't going in and eating consecrated bread.
He might have been, I can't off the top of my head mention it, but he might have. But it basically, this story here is here to tell us that human need is more important than Levitical observance. The human soul is more important than the rituals we do. So, on to verse 7. Now, a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord. His name was Doug from Liberty Mutual. Doug the Edomite, the chief of Saul's shepherds. Doug, I say Doug, it may be Doeg, but I will say Doug. I like that better. Doug means careful or detained, depending on. But what I want to point out here is, where is Doug from?
Edom.
He's from Edom. Anybody remember what Edom is? No. Edom, yeah, go ahead. It's there.
It's on the tip of your
You
tongue.
go ahead.
Okay. You called me, y'all hear me? Y'all hear me? You just called me a goat head. It's not very good. Edom was the land, the people that came out of Esau.
Yes.
Esau, how Jacob's name was changed to Israel. Well, Esau's name was changed to Edom. Okay? So, I know. It's neat how this all works out. So now we've got a person who is loyal, or so-called loyal to the throne of Saul, who's from Esau, their enemy.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Mhm. Yeah, well, it'll make more sense here in a few minutes. So, David said to Ahimelech, "Is there not a sword here with you? I did not bring my sword or my weapons with me because the king's business required haste."
Now, is David blind?
Yes, he's perpetuating a lie. But again, as he mentioned, we talked about it in men's group yesterday, this idea of righteous anger. And we hear about righteous anger. That's what Jesus expressed during the overthrowing of the money changers in the temple. There's also righteous lying, if you will. Lying in and of itself is wrong as a rule. However, there's an ethical dilemma. What if lying could save someone's life? Well, it changes the ethics of it. And so I personally believe that, well, I think I've mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. Whenever I have ethical dilemmas like this, I always ask two questions as a third one too. The first one is it right to do the wrong thing? Would it be the right thing to do to lie? Number two, is it wrong to do the right thing? Would it be wrong of me not to tell a lie? Number three is what is right and wrong here? What's the right thing to do? What's wrong? Yeah. So I have to determine question number three before I can really answer the first two. So anyway, yeah, you can take that with you. Yeah, so David is perpetuating the lie, and yeah, I had to get away, he's not really lying, he had to get away from the king.
He's not on the king's business.
Right, he's not on king's business. Well, I mean, I will say, a lot of preachers will say, well, it depends on the perspective. He could be telling the truth here. So anyway, the priest said, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine whom you killed in the valley of Elah, is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. Now we know where remember, when was the last place that we knew Goliath's sword was? It was in Saul's tent.
Mhm.
Because Goliath's head went where? Jerusalem. Jebus is what Jerusalem's called at this point, but yeah, it ended up in Jerusalem. And I'll get to that because I think that plays a big role. I may have mentioned it last week. I think that plays a big role in our context, specifically on this day, Easter Sunday. David said, "There is none like it. Give it to me." So yeah, I wonder what happened to the sword. Well, here it is. It went to Nob, and the priests had it. See, so this is an argument for preachers to be armed. Well, I expected a little more humor there.
You're wrong.
But you know what, probably some preachers would argue that from this.
Yeah. In this general vicinity, yes. David rose and fled that day from Saul. He went to King Achish of Gath. The servants of Achish said to him, "Is this not David, the king of the land? Did they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s." Now, Achish, I don't use the on CH, I use the sh on CH because it seems to be, for me, it's easier to say. Yeah.
Isn't this interesting? Isn't this David the king of the land?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Well, but look where he's from. He's from Gath. Remember when the Gath is one of the major cities of the Philistines. So David has gone, he's fled to the enemies of Israel for
So
protection.
he's the king of the land because he
killed
took
the
down
lion.
Goliath, basically.
Well, Ashish is, yes, yeah, you're right. He calls him King of the Lantern. Because it's not so much, I mean, he recognizes David here. He seems to forget it here in a few verses, who David is. But, yeah, he's carrying Goliath's sword. They know Goliath's sword. So, but what ends up in a humorous, but not so humorous moment is the song has made it over to the Philistines.
Yeah.
They know the song about Saul and David too. Yeah, Ashish was before the strong. It was really, Ashish is it's a title. So it's like saying King, the Royal Master or something. This isn't the real name of the person who is over Gath. This is another title, King, the Royal. David looks familiar to them and he appears to be defecting. And he's got Goliath's sword with him. So, verse 12, David took these words to heart and was very much afraid of King Ashish of Gath. So he changed his behavior before them. He pretended to be mad when in their presence. He scratched marks on the doors of the gate and let his spittle run down his beard. Ashish said to his servants, "Look, you see the man is mad. Why then have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen that you have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house?" So David is captured and he's taken to the king, and an indignity to the beard was an intolerable insult to that person. So David has extremely humbled himself and made him to appear as a crazy man.
So no threat.
Correct. And of course he does this because the Philistines are very proud people. No person who could ever kill Goliath would act like this. Goliath would never allow himself to be killed by a crazy person. So this can't be David. This has to be somebody else. Well, that worked, and they let him go. Do you think they kept Goliath's sword? Yeah. We never hear about it again. There is a tradition that it is in the hands of the Scythians in Ireland in 1911. So, some 2,000 years later, 3,000 years later, who knows? Who knows? It was made out of bronze. It could have lasted that long, although it would have been pretty decayed, pretty rough. But who knows? Who knows? If you take every splinter of what people say is part of the cross in the world and put them together, it makes a tree that is so huge it takes up the size of Texas or something. So
Who cares?
Right. What makes it important is the thought. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that little bit of useless trivia in there. So here is a map of kind of where, gives you an idea of where everybody is. Gibeah is hidden up here underneath the green. That's where Saul, so that little dot right there, that's where Saul's palace was, or where his headquarters was. Ramah is where remember, that's where Samuel is and where the main altar was. Nob down here is where David ran to. So he didn't run very far, but he ran far enough. This is the first biggest settlement he gets to, and so he's looking for anything that he can take further. But see this Jebus here? That's modern day, modern day Jerusalem is what that is. So that's how close things work. So from here, he takes Goliath's sword, and there's 5 loaves of shewbread, and he runs all the way here to Gath. So that's where David.
How far would that be?
It's about 15, 17 miles, from Nob to here anyway.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like basically it's from the church to my house. I wouldn't want to walk it, but I could if I had to, I guess.
Well, that's all they
In one
had
day.
then.
Right, yeah. Unless that DeLorean showed up at the the right time at that point. That's the only time machine I'm aware of. Didn't travel.
Michael, what are the words of the dad?
Down where?
The words are dad. What are the words?
Oh, it's the modern day name for it, which is Tel Asafi.
It's probably an excavation there.
Well, yeah, what is interesting is though most of the cities of the Philistines are, the information is pretty reliable. And there are modern day towns that are still set up there to this day. Of course, they're built up and maybe a mile or two over there. But all of the Philistine areas are still built up to this day, which is kind of neat. This past Tuesday, I say I got invited. I saw something on Facebook which caught my eye, and so I inquired about it. But I went to a showing of a new documentary that's going to be coming out probably in October, November timeframe, and it's a 6-episode documentary on the Ark of the Covenant, the temple specifically. But this particular episode is episode number 4. They did it first because of their timing with getting into Israel and out of Israel with everything that's going on. But it was titled Philistines, Warriors of the Sea, which was just very timely.
See?
Warriors of the Sea, they're the sea people. Remember when we started talking about the Philistines, I showed y'all that picture of a god, Dagon, that had fish scales going down his back. Now, granted, that is more of a Babylonian picture of the god of the Philistines. They have recently, in the past 2 years, 3 years, found another idol in that region of Gath, where Dagon was, Ekron, where Dagon was the main person, main god.
You lost me.
They found a little statue, a little idol of Dagon in Akron. And the fish scales were not as prominent. What it looked like was something from the Sumerians. The Philistines came from Crete and Cyprus.
What is the blue that's right there next to it?
That's the Mediterranean Sea.
Okay, so that's why they're called sea.
Mhm.
They're a long
They
way
came-
from the sea.
They came from the Aegean Islands. And they battled,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
quite a ways. But they battled Egypt and lost. And then they eventually settled in there. When I say they're from the Aegean Islands, if y'all have ever heard of the Minoans,
Yeah.
that is where they came from. The Philistines are descendants of the Minoans from Crete and Cyprus area. But they settled there on the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. Now, the same word that's used for Philistine or Philistia is the same word that we get Palestine from now. So, just reference. So,
So they never quit fighting.
no, no. So, anyway, and you can see some of these other cities here. They're not important to today's story. They may come to play a couple of weeks, but anyway. Just a thought that give y'all an idea of where we are.
Back then, what was the rub between the Israelites and the Philistines?
Well, the Israelites, even though they've got a king, they're still a band of loosely united tribes. They're still kind of nomads, even though they've settled down. Philistia, their economy, their society, their culture was very ingrained by this point. So they were here long before the Israelites were. There is a question of Philistine is one of the names in Genesis. Well, there's a historical problem with that because the Philistines didn't come from Crete and Cyprus until well after then. So they think it was just an editor putting the word Philistine in Genesis to make a point. What point? So next week, here's your first homework. Read Psalm 34. And, not next week, but, next time we meet. And next time we meet, we're gonna hear about a few good men, okay, about 400 of them. We're gonna hear about the 30 dozen. About the dirty dozen. I changed, movie titles on here. And then, the last thing, to kill a priest, or 2, or 85. So I would say read, as more homework, if you want to read ahead, you could read chapters 22 and 23. And it'll make a whole lot of sense. Those 3 titles make a whole lot of sense. But
You can send us an email with that.
I can.
Why don't you? So we'll-
Yeah, and I'll send Psalm 34 too. It'll be in our
We can look
SB.
up Psalm 34, but I can't look up those.
Psalm 34 has to do with what we just read. David running through something. Okay.
Michael, this is a pulpit next Sunday.
Bob will be preaching. I don't know exactly what he's preaching on, but we had discussed. I had originally planned, or part of my schedule was to preach on Thomas. That seems to be a general thing, the week after Easter to preach on Thomas. And he's kind of